Shalom Temple Israel. This Shabbat we will read the Torah portion of Mishpatim that opens Ve'ela HaMishpatim Asher Tasim Lifnehem. And these are the laws or the statutes or the judgments that you, Moses, shall put before them, the Israelites. It contains a series of laws that God expected our ancestors to follow as they lived in the desert and made their way to the land of Israel. But mishpatim are not what we usually think of as religious laws. They don't necessarily address keeping kosher or observing Shabbat or prayer, but rather they fall under what we might call civil laws or the interactions between different people. And it's interesting that just now I finished my monthly lunch and learn, and we addressed a topic that could be considered a mishpat, fall into the category of mishpatim. And that's how does Jewish law, how does Jewish practice approach the idea of vaccination, of taking medications that preemptively keep us safe from a virus, from an illness. Now, even though vaccination wasn't something that the Torah knew about, or that our ancestors knew about in the time of the Torah, we looked at Torah passages that discussed the value of preserving life, and Talmudic passages about taking actions to stay away from harm and from illness. And then we looked at what are called in Hebrew poskim, legal decisors, rabbis who throughout Jewish history answered questions that were applicable to their community. And that's where the discussion of vaccinations really start. How did rabbis address their communities in the past, in other plagues, pandemics, and when other new vaccinations were developed? And many of these writings came from the time of smallpox, and really needless to say, Jewish tradition strongly came down in favor of vaccinating ourselves and vaccinating our children once it is safe to do so. One of the most interesting questions that we talked about, or that I found to be very interesting, was a tshuva, a response by Rabbi Shlomo Gansfried, the author of a book called the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. And he was asked about a child who was going to receive a vaccine, but could only for smallpox, but could only get the vaccine on Shabbat. And Rabbi Gansfried first said that if it's possible, you should avoid that, to avoid violating Shabbat, but ultimately said that if you can't do that, the child should go get the vaccine on Shabbat. The child and his or her parents should therefore violate Shabbat in order to get the vaccine, which is a sign of just how serious Rabbi Gansfried took this obligation to protect the children and their families and all the people who came into contact with them, that they were supposed to violate Shabbat, what we think of as a core Jewish value, for the sake of getting a vaccine, of protecting their health. And most Jewish sources answer those questions in a similar way. It's a really fascinating topic to discuss and certainly very timely. If you'd like to hear more about it or hear the sources that I shared that we talked about at the class, please feel free to reach out to me and I will send them to you. It was really fitting to talk about this topic right now as more and more of us have been able to get the first or even the second dose of the vaccine. I started the class by asking how many people had at least one dosage, and a fair number of people had received their first shot, which was great to see. I was excited for myself and for Heidi, my wife, yesterday that Governor Cooper announced that soon teachers and clergy would be eligible, and I'm excited at the idea that soon, hopefully, we will be able to be together at Temple Israel, because I'm still looking forward to being a rabbi in person. Have a Shabbat Shalom and hope to see you soon.